You have now arrived at your destination.
Paul, this is such a joy to do. I've wanted to do this one for a long time. We've known each other for quite a while now, but thank you so much for joining me first.
Thank you for having me, Harry. I've listened to many episodes, so I'm very excited.
And it's so funny. Bubba was like, ask him how he has so much energy all the time. But I'm going to save that for a bit later in the show. I want to start with basically the founding of Clubhouse. Obviously, a name we all know and recognize today. Take me back to that founding aha moment for you. And what was that aha moment?
You know, Rohan, my co-founder, and I have been building social apps for over a decade now. So we've been at it for a while, and we've always been interested in this problem space. You know, the first company I started was a location-based social network called Highlight that helped you learn more about the people around you. And the whole thesis behind it was that the people in our lives, the people we become friends with, the people we marry, the people we do things with, the people we start companies with, they're the most important thing in the world. Nothing affects our lives and our happiness more than the people around us. But the way that we learn about people and the way that we decide how to bring new people into our lives and get to know them is just incredibly random and inefficient. And I didn't even realize that there were thematic similarities to Clubhouse till someone pointed it out to me on the app in Clubhouse. But we've been working on this stuff for a long time. Eventually, we sold Highlight to Pinterest, and I spent some time there. And Rohan was working on social apps as well. And we reconnected in late 2019. And we sort of said, man, we've always wanted to work together. Timing is lining up right now. Let's do it. What should we build? Obviously, we're not going to do a consumer social app because those things are crazy and we love them so much, but we've got kids and like it's probably not a rational thing to do. So we were looking at education, productivity, and enterprise and all sorts of other stuff. And we started to get deeper into audio, and we were looking at it going, man, we love this space so much. Like we love podcasts like yours. We love audiobooks. And I think most importantly, we love having conversations with our friends. And it's really hard to do that right now. And we were looking at what the state of the art was. And at the time, it was basically podcasting, which is great for listening, but it's not great for participating. And it's a lot of work. And it felt like it was going to grow quickly as a space because of AirPods and Alexa and text to speech and all sorts of other stuff. So as we got deeper into it, we eventually said, shoot, we have to build a social app. And, and I remember going back to my wife. We've been together since high school. And I'm like, so I'm really sorry, but we're going to build another social app. And she's like, I think that's great. I know you love it. And that's what you should be doing. So we sort of time boxed it. We said, okay, we'll give ourselves 6 months to try and make this thing work. And if it doesn't work, we'll go do something more boring where there's a more predictable relationship between input and output. And the first thing that we did, I think we might have reached out to you at this time, Harry. We had this app called Talk Show, which was like a more formal precursor to Clubhouse. It was a bit more broadcasty. And, we built it in a few weeks. There were hints of magic to it, but we didn't believe that it was going to be durable. It didn't seem like a place where people could go to discover content and hang out and talk. And so we killed it after about 6 weeks, and we moved the pieces around, and we launched the first version of Clubhouse. And you ask about the aha moment. It just kind of worked from the early days. And I can tell you more about why I think that happened. And, we worked really hard to give it the right conditions to grow. But I think pretty early on at Clubhouse, it just worked. And I think Rohan and I were probably the last ones to admit that something was working with the product because we've been doing this stuff for so long that you naturally try and become your own worst critic. But I think from the early days, we kind of felt there was.
Before we get to why it worked, I do just want to ask, I place a lot of value on serial entrepreneurship and the lessons that come from it. You mentioned the time with Highlight there and the 10 years before building in consumer social. What did you do with Highlight that you took with you to Clubhouse? What did you do that you did not take with you? How did it impact your building of Clubhouse?
Oh, man, I think there's a lot that I did not take with me intentionally. I mean, I loved Highlight. I loved it. It's a story for another time, but you learn so much. It's not a rational thing to keep like going back to the table with consumer social stuff. But one thing that has been heartening is that I do feel like you get better at it over time, right? You learn to pattern match. You learn things like not to overbuild, not to spend a ton of time on some secondary or tertiary screen that no one's really going to visit. You learn that tactical growth hacky things aren't really going to make your product work. That's not the right thing to focus on. So we talk about durability a lot. And, you just kind of get better at the craft. You're never, you've always got so much more to learn, but you pattern match. I think the most important thing, though, is that you learn how to build a company the right way. And again, it's an area where I've got a lot to learn. But Rohan and I spent a lot of time before we decided to build Clubhouse aligning on values. We sort of said, okay, if we're going to do this, we're going to keep the team really small. We're not going to raise money unless we really think something's working and we think we need to raise money. And we're going to move really quickly because that's a huge advantage that you have as a startup. But we're going to move quickly, not by taking on everything and burning everyone out and working 20 hours a day and doing everything poorly. But we're going to move really quickly by hiring experienced people who know what they're doing. Most of our people have done it before. They're at the top of their game in their field and their craft. They're brilliant. They're humble. And that makes such a difference. It's the best team that I've ever worked with. And in order to build out a team like that, I think you have to try really hard to be transparent with them about everything, to be pro-employee in every decision that you make. You don't build a great company by nickeling and diming and trying to optimize how much equity you retain. You have to kind of try and do the right thing even when no one's looking. And you have to be smart about how you execute as a team. So we have a set of operating principles, things like, 80-20 and respect for sequencing. And if something's not going to change the answer, don't bother doing the analysis, and no points for packaging on internal stuff, and type 1 versus type 2 decisions, frameworks that allow you to move faster. And so, when I look back at how I ran Highlight versus how I run Clubhouse, there's a lot that you take with you. And we've got a lot more to learn and a lot that we can get better at. And the team helps us get better every day. But I think that's the most important thing. If you can attract incredible, brilliant, humble people and get them to want to work together to build this thing, I think that makes all the difference in the world. And I think really good people respect a company that tries to act in a principled way.
Can I be blunt?
Yeah.
You founded Highlight, you sold it to Pinterest, you then worked at Benchmark. You had the experience in the network to hire those people, and you had the pedigree. If you're a normal founder who doesn't have the Benchmark EIR, the acquisition by Pinterest, good luck hiring your very, very experienced, very, very seasoned operators that early. It doesn't happen.
Yeah.
What would you say to them?
I think that's absolutely true. A couple of things I'd say. One is we didn't actually build out the team at Clubhouse until we felt that there was real traction there, that we really needed to build out a team. So when we did our Series A, the company was 2 of us. Rohan was doing all the engineering, I was doing all the pixels, and we would collaborate a lot on product. It was just us, banging on things in our basement for months. And I think that's really helpful. Don't scale the team until you need to. I think if you need to raise a team earlier, having some sort of prototype, having something that you can show them, I think that goes really, really far. And I think if you're scrappy, you can find a way to do that. And the way that you find people who want to build something with you is, number one, work on something that you love. And I feel so grateful that I get to work on something that I love. And again, it's not always a rational thing to do. But that's been one principle I've always sort of had is I'm going to try really hard if I can to work on something that I love, because then you just want to talk about it all the time. You want to think about it all the time. When you go to talk with potential co-founders, potential teammates, potential investors, it shows that you are so excited about this thing. You can tell the story better. And I think being able to tell a story well is so important as a founder, right? It's helpful for building the team, for recruiting, for fundraising, for closing business deals, for doing M&A. And so really investing in that goes a long way. And the last thing I'd say is that you are absolutely right that access is not evenly distributed. And that's something that I really hope Clubhouse can change. It's part of the reason why we built this thing. This idea that no matter where you live in the world, no matter how much money you have or what sort of networks you have access to, you can suddenly be in the room and you can meet people who are interested in the stuff that you're interested in. And, you can share ideas, you can explore things together, you can build things together. I think technology is going to allow more and more of that to happen. And I hope we can be a part of it.
So you mentioned there, two of you when you raised the Series A, and actually it was then that you realized that something was working. What were the signs that you knew that it was working and that actually
Yeah.
product market fit, tick, and it was time to ramp?
Yeah. We look at the stuff that you would expect us to look at, like retention numbers. That's really the big thing that we always come back to is retention and engagement. But if you think about it from a more zoomed out view, when we launched Clubhouse, it was quite simple. It was a single room. The whole app was a single room. There was no audience. Everyone was a speaker. There was no follow graph. Everyone followed everyone, and you couldn't change that. And so you'd come in and you got invited into this thing. You'd come in and you'd see your friends there hanging out, and you didn't even realize that your friends were there hanging out without you. And you'd see friends of friends and people that were in your extended network, and you'd talk with them and you'd laugh and you'd hang out and you would spend hours doing that. It really mimics that real world behavior of hanging out with friends. It just takes it online. And I think that core experience works. I think people love it. People stay for hours. They come back all the time. They spend dozens of hours a week on it, and they tell their friends about it, and those friends want to join. And I think word of mouth is the best way for a product to grow. Right. And my fundamental belief is that the best communication products, they don't invent new behaviors. They take what we are wired to do as humans, what we love doing, and they make it easier to do it instantly with anyone. And this predates the internet, right? Like think about the telephone. Before the telephone, I could only speak to people who were within earshot. That's crazy. Like I could yell and they'd hear me 50 feet away, but that was it. And then we got the telephone and suddenly I could sit here and I could talk with people all over the world. And before video, we could only see things that were line of sight. And now I can see through buildings and across continents, and I can see you here today. And if you think about the internet, what that did, it only accelerated that, right? With Amazon, we always knew that we had to go shop and buy things, and it allowed us to do it instantly with infinite selection on the internet. Why did Tinder work? It worked because people love to date, but now suddenly you could do it without getting rejected, and you could do it from anywhere. Why did Zoom work? We have to have business meetings, but now you could do it from anywhere. And with Clubhouse, it's the same principle in my mind. It's hanging out. It's talking with friends and friends of friends and having good conversations, but now you could suddenly do that instantly. But I do think that when these products take off, all the ones I named and other ones, there's usually a why now moment, right? Like if you think about Facebook, people suddenly had cell phones, but there was no way to look up people's cell phone numbers. And, that was one of the big factors, I think, that made it take off at Harvard. When you think about Twitter, it was probably unlimited texting plans and a few other things. When you think about Instagram, we just suddenly got mobile photos, but they were slow and they weren't very high quality, and we needed a better way to share them. Tinder, you had Facebook Connect and background location. And I think with Clubhouse, there was a why now. I think it was AirPods. I think it was Alexa. I think it was text to speech. I think COVID accelerates remote living. But I just fundamentally believe that technology takes offline behavior that we love doing already, and it makes it dramatically easier. There's usually a why now where there's sort of like a 5-year window where it becomes possible to take a new experience online. And inevitably, some company is going to come along with the right combination of timing and execution on the exact details and a lot of luck, and they will be the one to grow. And so, in our case, the growth was a lot faster than we had expected or planned for. But I think the reason it works is because people love hanging out with friends and meeting their friends.
I mean, the growth was insane. And if there's one thing that I get criticized for, Paul, well, many things, I'll be terrible for that. But one thing really is that I'm too soft, apparently. Twitter loves to tell me I'm too soft. Never like them anyway. But I promise not to be. And so, obviously we had this hockey stick growth, and then I'm being direct, we had this decline. And I wanted to talk about the reasons for the decline before we talk about the future. Number one reason for decline, which I often think to, is, as you mentioned, COVID there and the consumer behavior. We were fucking lonely, we were bored, and we were isolated. And we were given this drug of Clubhouse, which made us not lonely and not bored. My question to you is, was Clubhouse the COVID antidote? And was it a short-term consumer behavior change?
I think that COVID is temporary, but remote living is permanent. And what you see over time is that we have offline experiences and then online complements come, and they're not as high fidelity, but they have other advantages. And over time they get better and they take share from offline, and then they expand the market for it. And I think, like I was saying, shopping it was Amazon, and dating was Tinder, and meetings was Zoom. And I think friendship and hanging out and being with people is going to go the same way. We're a funny company, right? Like we tried really hard to grow slowly, and we succeeded for 9 months, right? The reason we had the invite model is because it was two of us, and we didn't want to grow too quickly because things break. The reason we didn't do press was because we didn't want to grow too quickly. 6 months after the Series A, the company was still probably like 7 of us, 8 of us. And then we had a couple months where we just grew like 10x every month. And that does a couple things, right? The first thing is it gives you 2 months of silly download numbers that everyone will compare the company to. But it also stresses the system, right? Those numbers during those couple months, they looked really good on paper, but we weren't giving people a good experience. It was a terrible experience. You try and use the app, and it hadn't been built to support that level of scale. So everything is breaking. You're getting error messages. The app is crashing. It's in the wrong language. And I think more generally, that community that we had worked hard to build got too big, which made it really hard to find relevant people if you joined 6 months after we had started, right? But it was a very important time for the company, because a subset of those people somehow managed to find their way through the madness and find their friends and find their people and find their communities. And those people started to form the core of the community that we have today. So millions of people from all over the world, doctors and writers and poets and TikTokers and pizza makers and truckers and physicists and students in Kentucky and people in the Maldives and comedians in LA. It's the best community that I've ever known in my entire life. And somehow they persisted and found it. And our goal is not to grow 10x per month. That is never going to be sustainable. That's never going to be a good experience for any product. Our goal is to take the foundation that we have, the incredible foundation that we have, stay heads down building, and just make it better and better every week. So COVID absolutely accelerates remote living. But I think remote is permanent, and I think people want to hang out with friends.
What is the North Star metric then? Is it the amount of sessions that people join? Is it the amount of time they stay for in the session? Is it the amount they host? What is the guiding metric which determines the success of a user on Clubhouse?
I think we mostly look at retention, and we look at input metrics for stuff that we're launching. So engagement, like you're talking about, that matters a lot. Our average person, if you join a room on Clubhouse, on average, you're there about 70 or 80 minutes a day. 30 to 40% of people are talking, depending if you look on a weekly or daily basis. So it's really, really participatory. But the thing that you want to optimize for is retention. If you can build a retentive product that people love, then you're going to grow, I believe.
What's the right retention numbers? I had a lunch with one of the most successful consumer social investors of all time just now, and he was like, "Harry, you need to look at the 12-month retention numbers." And I was like, 12 months? Fucking hell, that's a long time. I was looking at 6 months, so I felt like shit. Like, what retention numbers to you are indicative enough of stickiness?
I think that I think that 12-month retention is great, but you also need to learn really quickly. And so I think D1 retention is usually a good predictor of D7. And once you get to D30, if something is sticking by D30, it usually sticks pretty well, right?
What is good for D30? I don't think Snap had like 35%. What's good for D30?
So different companies define it in different ways. If you define D30 as what percent of people who install the app on D0 physically open the app on the 30th day, not on the week that follows, but on that day, I think north of 20% is good. 50% is great.
Yeah, I got you. What was yours?
We don't talk about our internal metrics.
Am I not allowed to ask that?
You can ask it. That's fine.
Always worth a try. Okay, so we discussed COVID there. The other one that I actually spoke to Mike Mignano about, which is obviously the founder of Anchor,
Yeah.
many years ago, is he
Yeah.
said the thing I learned is live does not work, Harry. People want on demand. People want to listen in their own time. Why do you think that's wrong?
Yeah, I think that that's generally right for content, right? Mike's great, and I think his background, he usually works more in content, and Mike and I are friends. He's great, but I think he's generally right for content, right? News is an exception where you want to talk about what's breaking, what's happening right now. I think sports is an exception where you need to know who the winner is. Another exception is interactive content. Like if you think about a Zoom concert wouldn't be really fun because the experience of being there is such a part of it. It's a sensory experience. Being able to look at other people in the audience and see that they also know all the lyrics and they're just as excited as you are, that matters. And there's some online experiences where you're in the chat, talking with other people, you might interact with the speakers. So interactive can be an exception. And I do think there's something qualitatively different about live that we don't really understand. Like I'm sure you've had the experience in the past where you're in the car and a song comes on the radio that you like, and you're like, oh my gosh, we've got to listen to this. But you wouldn't open up Spotify and listen to it in the moment, even though you could. There's something about live that feels special. But generally, I think Mike's right and you're right. Live for content is really hard. From my perspective, Clubhouse is not about content. Clubhouse is about talking. Right. And like I was saying, 70 to 80 minutes a day, people are in these rooms and 30 to 40% of them are talking. They're hanging out with people. They're there being with friends and meeting friends of friends. I think it would be a bad strategy to try to compete for passive content, because I think what you're saying about live is right.
So you don't. So I guess my question is like I always view like the ultimate currency is the consumer's time. That is the currency that I compete for, and which is why I compete against games. In my mind, I compete against Netflix. It's not just invest like the best. There's many other things that we compete against. Love you, Patrick. But my point being there, like, who do you compete against then? Because like, are you competing against the phone call with my mum? Or you are competing with podcasts still, though, aren't you?
I think it depends. It depends on what the person is looking for. There are people that open up Clubhouse to listen. But I think the most magical experience, the thing that people, when you talk with people who love Clubhouse, like the millions of people in the core community, what they love it for is the people that they meet, the friends that they're hanging out with, the conversations that they have. And at the end of the day, everyone is competing for time. That's true. But there are certain contexts, certain times during the day where I feel like passively listening or passively watching videos. And there are other times where I feel like hanging out and talking with people. And I think Clubhouse competes more on the latter.
I totally get you. Can I ask you a blunt question, Paul?
Yeah.
There is this unbelievable ability for us today to build up these heroes in technology. Yeah. And the desire to do that is so we can then smash them. As bluntly, many media people have liked to do with Clubhouse. They've liked to do with Hopin, many other companies. How does it feel?
I think you have to have a thick skin if you're going to do startups. I think that's something that I've kind of developed over the years, because I think in the earlier days when I was doing the highlight, I would take it really personally, right? Like I remember someone wrote us an email one time when it was just two of us at Highlight, and they're like, F you for not having an Android app. And we're like, geez, it's just two of us and we're trying hard. And I think that I think you just have to have a thick skin or else you're just going to crumble, right? I feel that I really admire entrepreneurs. I really admire people who take a swing, and it's so easy to try to dunk on people and shit on people and say why something can't be done. But I get personally really inspired by the people that are out there trying, right? Like I read this book on the Wright brothers a while back, and it's like 100 years ago. It wasn't that long ago, but they're sitting there on the ground, looking up at the sky going, I'm going to figure out how to make man fly. And everyone who was trying it just died. Like so many people just died. It was so dangerous. And everyone was just like laughing and saying it couldn't be done. But I think the people that really move things forward are the ones that are building stuff and trying stuff. And so I try to celebrate that, and we try to celebrate that as a team, and have my kids learn to value that sort of thing. But the reality is, when you're trying, like, you're gonna you're gonna have to deal with that, right? And I think the only response is to have a thick skin and to just stay focused, heads down, building, right?
It makes me think of I think it's the Roosevelt quote, which is like, credit
Yeah,
goes
the
to
man in the arena.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
I love that. My question to you is, I get that. You are a seasoned entrepreneur. You have a thicker skin. You're also just more mature as a person, bluntly. You wouldn't know it looking at us, but I'm a little bit younger than you, and I'm on the Clubhouse team, say. I do not have such a thick skin. How do you maintain morale and leadership when there is negative press cycles? And although you're good, you need to uphold your team and instill that fighting confidence in them.
Yeah.
How do you do that as a leader?
I think it's really challenging. It's one of the bigger challenges of building a company when when it's not a linear path, right? One other thing I would say about having personal perspective on it, I feel immensely grateful that I live in a world where I get to spend time building something I love. That's insane, right? How blessed and fortunate do you have to be to get to spend your time doing that? So I think having that perspective is important. I think kids changed my perspective too. You kind of don't worry as much about Silicon Valley nonsense, and you kind of know what matters. But I think for the team, it's hiring really great people, and talking openly about it, right? And sort of saying, like, I think good people really respect transparency. They don't want you to sugarcoat stuff. They don't want you to bullshit them. They want you to be straight with them. And the reality is, startups are not a linear path. If you look at most social platforms that have eventually succeeded, they went through some messy middle period, and some didn't make it, and some did. And so we sort of tell them, here's where we think we are. Here's what we know. Here's what we think works. Here's what we think the right next step is. If you disagree, like, please tell us. We talk a ton about product as a team, but I think just honesty and transparency and being able to explain what you think the mission is and why you're so excited about it, I think that tends to resonate with people. And that's what we try and do. It's again something that you learn as an entrepreneur over the years. Right?
I'm pushing the boundaries here of acceptability, so you shoot me down by all means.
Yeah.
I did think, was it tempting with the Twitter offer?
I can't comment on that, but I will say that we've thought a lot about how this world plays out and who ultimately wins and what is the right to win. And I think that what we're working on has the potential to really, really impact society in a big way. And it feels obvious to me that this is going to exist. And I think the company that wins is going to be a company that is fully focused on the medium, right? And maybe I'll be wrong, but if you look at history, that is how it has played out. New networks don't come along very often. They tend to happen when there's a new medium that emerges on the internet. And historically, the company that is focused on that medium has tended to win. Like text was Twitter. Photos was Instagram. Video was YouTube, and now TikTok. And I think spoken audio, talking, conversations, I think that's going to be the same. And the reasons for that are really tied to the fact that when I use a product, when I use it, how I use it, so much of that is a function of the medium. If I'm using an app that is short form text or photos, I usually open it when I have 20 seconds to spare. I have 2 minutes to spare. I'm walking down the hallway. I'm waiting in line for a cup of coffee. I don't have AirPods in. I'm not looking to participate. The set of people who I follow are the people who are really good at that medium. The primary discovery surface that the app opens to is dedicated to that medium. If it's on some secondary or tertiary screen, usage plummets. If it's not the company's most important reason for being, they shutter it when things get hard for them. The business model, the brand, all of it is tied to that medium. So I believe that the company who wins is going to be a company that is fully focused on that medium. And I think that we're in a good position to do that. And we're fortunate that we raised a lot of money before the tech downturn. We've built the best team that I've ever worked with in my entire life. And our goal is to just stay heads down and focus on the product, focus on the community, and just make it better and better and better every week. And I think if you do that, it puts you on a good path.
How much runway do we have?
We have years of runway right now.
That's always helpful.
Yeah. And that assumes no revenue. We've got a lot.
Nice. That's perfect. I do want to talk, you mentioned kind of the medium there.
Yeah.
I think one thing that we've seen is actually kind of the disregard for the social graph, which we've all hailed for so many years. And you see this across Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, towards this, and I think Mignano does this well, which is like the disregard for that and the praising now and the complete movement towards kind of recommendation media, and really all companies being machine learning discovery platforms for media. And TikTok really kind of pioneering that. Do you agree with that?
I think there's some truth to that for content platforms, but I don't think Clubhouse is a content platform. And so the way that I think about it is you have kind of a spectrum from communication products like messenger apps to media products, and they all operate pretty differently. So with Clubhouse, I think that some of that applies. Like the real core of Clubhouse, it's friends of friends. Like if you think about it, there are a lot of products that are private 5-person messenger products for people you already know, small groups of friends that know each other. There are a number of great products for big admin-led community management, Discord and Slack and like legacy Facebook groups. I think the world tends to operate around friends of friends. If you think about the best social experiences you've ever had, they've probably been times when you were hanging out with a few people that you knew and maybe some other people that you didn't know, but that you trusted because they were friends of your friends, or because they also went to the same school, or they worked at the same company, or they were at the same local bar and they lived near you. And that's a really special thing in the world right now. And I think that hasn't fully come online yet. So if we can help connect you with your friends and serve that sort of presence layer where you can open up your phone anytime you want and just talk with a few friends, and allow you to meet other people through your friends, or perhaps through recommendations that you might not know yet, but you could become great friends with, who care about the stuff that you care about, who could have great conversations with you. I think that's a really powerful thing.
So I'm an investor in Be Real, and everyone is shitting on me because I'm like, oh, Be Real has real defensibility, and everyone's like, oh, well, any big consumer social company can just copy you. So I thought, who else to ask but you for your advice? Twitter Spaces. What do you make of that? Because I listened and I was like, okay.
Yeah.
It kind of didn't, I don't know, it just didn't hit with me, and I don't know if they're still going with it. Maybe they still are. In which case I'm just terribly out of touch. But like, how did you analyze the Twitter Spaces product move? What do you think?
Do you mean, how do I think about Twitter Spaces in general?
Yeah, like, what do you think of the product? Do you think they've done well with it? Are you like, yeah, I respect them for that? Or you're like, well, it's pretty shitty in that way, actually. Like, how do you guys internally evaluate Twitter Spaces and how they've done building it out?
I think that we've seen quite a few larger legacy networks build out audio products over the last year and a half.
Yeah.
And, with varying degrees of success. I think that Twitter is doing what they've done in the past, which is helping people broadcast to other people. And I think that, they've done a fine job at that. And it's pretty different from what I think we target at Clubhouse.
Yeah.
And I can talk more about the difference between those two in my mind, but I think it's a broadcast product.
So you think it's different? You think theirs is a content game?
I think it is much more so in that direction, yeah. They recently combined it with podcasts in the podcast tab, I think. I think that's really what they're targeting as broadcast.
Okay, I get you.
Yeah.
That we mentioned Be Real. I mean, Be Real's kind of premise is authenticity.
Yeah.
How do you think about kind of the rise of authenticity in social, where we've kind of moved from this, generation of kind of decadence and perfection to now we want selfies of our friends with no makeup looking terrible, or me, without coffee looking like an ogre in the morning, and that's cool now. I'm so confused. I feel like such an old man here, but I'm like, how do you think about the rise of authenticity and kind of that realness integrated into the next generation of social?
I think authenticity is a means to an end. So when you provide a stress-free environment where people can be themselves, it helps build friendship and connection. In the same way that for us, I think of audio as a means to an end. It allows you to hear nuance and intonation and tone without worrying about what you look like or how messy your house is. So I think authenticity is a means to an end. And that is why we built Clubhouse, right? We have actively seen more and more rooms going private and semi-private over time. So you actually only see a fraction of what's happening on the Clubhouse network when you open the app, and that's increasingly true over time. And I think there's a lot of value in that, right? And they're just different products, right? Broadcast is one thing, and there are people that just want content that is not interactive. I think authenticity works with friends and friends of friends and people in situations where you want to build relationships with people. And that's a very powerful thing.
Yeah. One thing I found interesting with Clubhouse, we haven't spoken about this before, but it was the recording function. One thing I loved about Clubhouse and love about Clubhouse is no one can hear me say it, so I can say whatever I want. And if you're in the room, you hear me, and fine. I hope you don't tweet it.
Yeah.
But when it was recording, I was like, "Oh shit!" I don't. Do you know what I mean? I was very much on guard because people can hear this.
Yeah.
How do you feel about losing that authenticity with the introduction of recording and making that possible?
Yeah. So I think it's a customer segmentation thing. I think that with Clubhouse, there are two sides to the platform. There is the broadcast side, right? There are people that are broadcasting. That's fantastic. That's a reason why people come to the app. They come to these rooms with their friends. They talk about those rooms in the in-between moments. But the majority of the network is people hanging out and talking, and those people are not recording their rooms. And I think it's fine for broadcast and hanging out, like conversation, to coexist. Like think about Instagram. Something like, I think 40% of accounts are public and they want reach and followers and branded content and monetization. And something like 60% I've heard go private. And those people want something really different. They want to share photos with their friends. And they don't care about how many likes they have. They care about who liked it and what they said. And the interactions that they have there affect their real life friendships. So I'll say, "Oh, Harry, I saw you went on vacation. That looked amazing. Where were you when we hang out in person?" And they work really well together. Like I'll follow some of these accounts and some of these accounts, and the system kind of works. Clubhouse is very similar. So if there are people that want to do broadcasts, they can do that. But the majority of people are actually hanging out. And one thing that we've learned, which is kind of relevant to this, is when we started Clubhouse, the whole entire experience was people hanging out, like you were mentioning. And in fact, it was only one community. And it's great. It's a magical experience when you know people there and you can meet friends of friends. But as that grows, it can stress the system, right? And I think that's something that we sort of experienced in Clubhouse. And the way that communities really should grow, I believe, is through this process of mitosis, where when people feel they're getting too big, they can split off and form a new group. And this happens in the real world all the time, right? Like you go to a house party, you're one of the first 4 people there. It's one circle of people in the living room. But if you come an hour later, there are 6 circles of people, and some are on the balcony and some are in the kitchen. And that's great. People split off so they can scale that intimacy. And with Clubhouse, I think it's really important that we can allow the people that don't want recordings, that want the off the record conversations, to have an experience that scales. And so right now, one of the things that we're doing is actually splitting the network up into many different networks. So anyone, any person, any group, any community can create their own private section within Clubhouse called a house. And I think if you build the graph structure the right way and you set the defaults properly, you can actually allow the intimacy that you're talking about to scale to arbitrary sizes.
Speaking of kind of building the graph structure the right way, I remember once hearing Kevin Systrom say that the best social products are fundamentally built on the foundations of giving creators or people tools to create that they didn't have before. For Instagram, it was beautiful filters, which made everyone a wonderful photographer.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that statement, that it starts with creator tools?
I think that it often does. There's a great quote that I will paraphrase and butcher, which is virality is all about making your users look awesome in front of their friends. and constraints are really important in social media too. So I think there's a lot of truth to what Kevin is saying. I have tremendous respect for Kevin. It depends on the type of product though. Like if you think about Tinder or LinkedIn, they're more people networks. And so sometimes the benefits come from liquidity. They come from making it dramatically easier to like connect with other people, regardless of your location. I think all information technology is about reducing friction. And I've always been amazed at how seemingly small reductions in friction have a massive impact on usage. And if you can make stuff easier to do, and if you can make it easier for me to look like I'm really good at this thing, that's even better. So I think there's a lot of truth to what he's saying.
I totally agree. Yeah, if they could do a thinning filter on Instagram, I'd be even more.
Probably coming.
Final one before we do a quick fire. The world is abuzz with Web3.
Yeah.
Honestly, I mean, wait for you to answer this one first. Web3, like, what will it take for it to break through? Is it here for the long term? Is it sustainable, or is this just another fad?
I'm very long on crypto. I'm a strong believer. I think it's the right way for the internet to evolve. Right now, we're building an economy into Clubhouse. We're in the early stages of it, but hoping to have something out there in the not too distant future. And what we'd like to do is do it all on top of Web3 rails, but have it be completely under the hood. And I think with Web3, with crypto, like the challenge has been that the UX is just not there yet. But a lot of the core components that you need to do things like fiat on-ramp and custody and everything else, I think those will be coming online in the next 6 to 9 months. And I feel that for products in general, the inflection point often comes when services get built on top of them without end users even realizing it, right? It's when people build on top of it because it just allows them to do new things for the user. And the user doesn't even have to know what's happening under the hood. Like an example that I often think about is Wikipedia. When Wikipedia came along, no one cared that it was built on the LAMP stack or even that it was a web-based encyclopedia. They cared that it was free instead of the $900 volumes of Encyclopedia Britannica on their bookshelf. They cared that it was free, that it was accessible from anywhere, and that it was constantly updating. And so I believe that in the medium to long term, we'll have products that are built on top of Web3 technology that are just better. And it just becomes obvious that you should build on top of those because you can do things for consumers that you couldn't do before.
You know what, Paul? I agree with you. So long on Web3. I literally tweet shit about Web3, and then my business partner's like trying to invest in Web3 companies, and all the founders like, Harry fucking hates it. And I'm like, yeah, sorry. Terribly challenging.
Timing's a big thing, you know?
Timing's a big thing, crucial. I want to dive into a quick fire, my friend. So I say a short statement, you hit me with your immediate thoughts. Sound okay?
Yeah.
Okay, so what's the favorite book and why?
I only do audiobooks. My wife makes fun of me because I'll say, oh, I read this book, and she goes, listen to. I don't have a single favorite, a couple good ones. I really like Carlo Rovelli. Reality is Not What It Seems. He writes about physics, but it's very poetic. I like The Information by James Click, which is about the history of literally information and how it travels and how we record it. Those are a couple. I do mostly like nonfiction and tech and science books.
What is the single biggest thing you got right with Clubhouse?
I think that we managed to concentrate liquidity and get people all in a single room at the same time and get a good community going. And the whole trick is how do you repeat that for many, many, many communities at the same time?
What is the single biggest thing you got wrong with Clubhouse?
I think we didn't hire fast enough.
Huh. What would you have hired sooner?
Engineers.
Crucial. What's the hardest element of your role with Clubhouse today?
I think building a remote team is really hard. I believe that I don't think it's practical to build a fully in-person company anymore. I don't want to be fully distributed. And I think, we went from 9 people to 95 people over the course of a year, and building culture and communication and all the right working patterns in that environment is really tricky, especially when you're doing it in a very public way.
It's also like I do the same with funds and media companies. New people join, you're like, are you happy? Like, are you enjoying it? Like, did you have a good day? And you have no idea whether they're miserable or like very happy. I find that tough. How did you get Elon on Clubhouse?
We did not. The Good Time Show did. Like all of the stuff that has happened on Clubhouse, the vast majority of it just happened totally organically. By the user community. The community is amazing. It's literally the best community I've ever experienced anywhere. And all of the people that come on, all the moments that happen, it's all driven by the community.
Were you pissed when Mark and Ben went to YouTube?
You mean when the Good Time Show went to YouTube?
Well, yeah.
I think I think YouTube's a great platform for people that want to do that want to do broadcasts. I think it's fantastic, right? And you see Mike, you mentioned, has written about how a lot of podcasts and podcast products are going to go to video and go to YouTube, and I understand the reasons for that. I think it's a good thing to do.
Wonderfully graceful answer. So very different. If I could remove one recurring event from your calendar, my friend, what would it be?
I have a recurring block to answer emails, and that's the one I look forward to the least. But Rohan, my co-founder, I think the hardest I've ever made him laugh was I made a joke about not being inbox zero, I'm outbox zero. I would remove that meeting and not do it if I didn't have to.
What's your biggest advice to founders on dealing with the media and hype?
Get advice from someone who's done a better job of it than I have. No, I think you just have to have thick skin, right? Like you literally just have to. If you don't, you will crumble anytime someone, says something mean about you, and it's going to distract you. You got to have thick skin and stay focused.
Did you believe the hype? I remember when there was like, Paul is Zuck and Clubhouse is Facebook. And I remember literally, because it was one weekend in particular, when I literally got 25 calls from growth funds, everyone asking to buy my tiny investment. It's not big. But I mean, it was fucking crazy. Did you believe the hype then? It's hard not to.
I think it's really nice building this company when I have some experience and I've done this stuff before and like I'm older, honestly. Like the nice thing about that is when things are crazy good, you're like, yeah, but it'll die down. When things are hard, you say, yeah, but we'll figure this out. You have so much perspective on it, and you tend to be your own harshest critic. You tend to be the most skeptical. And that's why we didn't raise money for a long time. We're like, yeah, it seems like it's working, but we don't know if this will scale. And I think perspective really helps with that.
You love all your angels equally. Which angel's been most helpful to you and why?
I think Bubba Maraka has probably been the most helpful. He's
why so? I mean, I chatted to him before the show and loved him, but why so?
He is just like, anyone who has a chance to work with him should work with him. He's just endlessly supportive, there on a dime if you need him to do anything. Really great to brainstorm on product ideas with. Always has great, crazy ideas. He's just fantastic, like absolutely phenomenal.
What do you know now that you wish you'd known at the start of Clubhouse?
I wish we had known when it would hit an inflection point and we would start growing really fast. It's what I was saying before. Like, I wish that we had built out the team sooner, because then we would have been, fewer things would break.
What was the biggest thing to break?
I mean, I think in the near term, like the discovery for a few months was really broken, right? But I think in the long term, the problem that you have to solve is, the infrastructure in the near term was broken for a few months. But I think in the long term, discovery is the biggest thing that you need to fix, right? If you suddenly have 10x, 100x as many people, how do you ensure that everyone gets in the right room at the right time without seeing a bunch of noisy rooms in their feed? And it's a process, right? You take a long-term view and you just kind of accept that a lot of people joined and had a bad experience. but millions of people made it through, and you've got this core community. And if you just focus on the long term, you just grow that steadily every month over time.
Final one for you, Paul. Clubhouse in 5 years, which is what, 2027. We do another show. Where is Clubhouse then?
Our mission at Clubhouse is to increase friendship in the world, right? To create a place where you can be among friends, meet their friends, talk about anything. And we have a lot more to do to make sure everyone has that experience when they join. But in 5 years, my hope is that everyone listening to this uses Clubhouse whenever they want to talk with friends, whenever they want to have a good conversation. And by doing that, they've made a ton of new friends. They've learned, they've connected with people, and they have a place where they can always just open their phone and they can feel at home. And I think that if we can do that, if we can fill everyone's life with fun and interesting people, no matter where you live, no matter where you work from, no matter what networks you have access to, I think that's a pretty amazing future to imagine.
Paul, I cannot thank you enough. Bubba was completely right on your energy. It is pretty incredible to see. But I cannot thank you enough for being so open, and forgive me for my prying questions.
No, not at all. Thank you so much, Harry. I really enjoyed it.